So you're starting to get a pretty good grasp on app service web apps. In fact, you might even be thinking about starting your own website at this point. And if you are, chances are you might be a little turned off by the fact that you browse your website using this Azure websites.net URL. Well, not to fear, because you can use your own domain name with app service, and that means you can configure your web app so that you can use www.yourawesomewebsite.com. Actually, no, you can't because someone has already bought that domain name, but you get the idea. So in app service, you can bring your own domain name, which means that you buy a domain from a domain registrar and you bring it to app service. Now, if you want an easier approach, you can buy an app service domain, which means you're actually buying the domain from inside the Azure portal. You're buying it from Microsoft. Now, either way, you can not only use a custom domain name, but you can also add an SSL certificate. The easiest way to go is to buy an app service domain, because that makes it super easy to configure. But it's really not that hard to configure, even if you bring your own domain. So let's check out how you can configure a custom domain name in app service. So we're back here with our familiar GDSWA web app, and we can see right here in the domain section of the overview that the default domain is gswa.azurewebsites.net. What I want to do is use another domain name that I own. A couple of different ways I can do that. I can click Add Custom Domain right here, or I can choose Custom Domains from the Settings menu. Either one of those takes you to the same place, and that's right here. So this is where we can add our custom domain. Right now, I don't have a custom domain, so I'm going to click Add Custom Domain, and what I want to use here is all other domain services. As I told you before, I could use an app service domain, which means a domain that I've purchased from Microsoft, but I don't have one of those because I purchased a domain a long time ago that I would like to connect to this web app. So I'm going to choose all other domain services. The next option here is our SSL certificate, and so, just as with an app service domain, you can buy an SSL certificate from Microsoft, and that's an app service managed certificate. I am going to do that later. I'm not going to do it right now. So what I want to do here is enter my domain name, and this is your top-level domain name, and I'm going to use jamescheshire.com. So once I enter that, it enables this hostname record type drop-down. And right now it's set to a record. Why is it set to a record? Because I entered a top-level domain. I didn't enter a subdomain like www.something. I just entered the domain name .com. So that's an A record. So what I need to do now is I need to copy these hostname records that Azure shows here. Enter those with my domain provider. My particular domain provider is GoDaddy. So I'll go out to GoDaddy, and I'll enter these records in my DNS records at GoDaddy. And after I do that, I'll validate that, and that will add that to my web app. Now I have updated my domain registrar with the domain records that it shows here. I've added an A record with a host name of an int symbol, and a value of the IP address shown here. I've added a text record with a host name of Azure, and that has a value of this string that's shown here. And so once I do that, I do have to wait just a little bit of time for that change to propagate through the DNS system. But once that happens, I should be able to click Validate right here, and when I click Validate, App Service will go out to my domain registrar and make sure those records exist and are configured in the right way, and if they are, it will approve that. So let's go ahead and click Validate, and it says Validation Passed. So that means those records are all configured correctly. Now I can click Add, and that will finish adding that registration. So now I have the James Cheshire.com setu, but I can browse to James Cheshire.com at this point and actually access my web, and now I would like to also be able to browse to www.jamescheshire.com. That's typically the way people will browse to web apps. So let's add that domain as well. I'm going to click Add Custom Domain again and again, This is all other domain services, and the domain we're going to use is www.jamescheshire.com, and this is a name record. A name record is used to configure a subdomain. And in this case, the subdomain is www. So notice that I've got a couple of different records now that I need to go out and add to my domain registrar. So I've added those records to my DNS settings in GoDaddy as I did before. And just as with the records that I added before, you'll have to make sure that you give it a little time to propagate that through the system, and then you should be able to validate it. If you click on Validate and it doesn't succeed after you've added the records, your best bet is just make sure that you added them correctly. It's easy to make very small mistakes with that. As long as you've done that correctly and Validate doesn't work, it just means you need to give it a little more time. So as I said, I've added these already. I'm going to go ahead and validate this and make sure that these records are configured correctly. And now that validation is passed, I'm just going to click Add, and now you can see I've got not only jamescheshire.com that I can use, but also www.jamescheshire.com. And of course in real life, I would want to add an SSL binding for both of those using an SSL certificate. Oh, that's how easy it is to add custom domains to your web as an Azure A service.